So now that we've talked about the executor framework at a high level, now that we've talked about the concept of a thread pool, now that we talked about the types of Java thread pools, let's talk about some of the key interfaces that are defined in the Java Executor framework that are used to program all this stuff. And you'll see that there's about a half dozen key public interfaces, and then there's also another pile of things that are kind of hidden from you but are important to understand how the whole thing works under the hood. So there's several key interfaces we're going to focus on here. We're going to start with the executor, which is the simplest interface. This is almost too simple. It's kind of simple-minded, in fact. It's not that common to use it in practice because it's so simple. And as you can see, it's what's called a functional interface. It has one method called execute. That's all it has. And this API, which is quite simple, decouples task submission. In other words, some client code that says, I'd like to execute this runnable, from the mechanisms or the mechanics of how a given task will run, which is pushed down into the implementation of this interface. And then you'll see there's a bunch of different ways to implement this interface. So executor, super duper simple, super duper simple-minded. Because executor is so super duper simple-minded, there's another much more common interface for thread pools called the Executor Service. This interface extends executor, so it inherits this execute method, and then it adds a whole bunch more things. And the things it adds allow it to be able to submit one-way and two-way calls, which give back these things called futures. We'll talk about futures in a second. Futures are used to manage the life cycle of tasks that are running in or about to be running in other threads in the pool. And then we also have a whole pile of methods here that controls the life cycle of an executor service itself. So you can shut it down, you can shut it down now, you can see if it's shut down, you can see if it's terminated, you can wait for everything to shut down. And then there's also a pile of methods here that are used to run collections of things, either all of them or one of them. And we'll talk about those as well. The key point to take away from this particular slide is that Executor Service has a boatload of capability on top of the simple-minded executor. There's also an even more powerful, an extended version of the Executor Service called Scheduled Executor Service, which supports all of the Executor Service methods because it extends it. And then it also adds support for future processing of tasks, either one-shot and or periodic execution of tasks. So what you can do is you can say, schedule this task to run in 5 minutes, or schedule this task to run in 50 milliseconds. And you can also say, schedule this task to run in 2 days, and then run it after that point once a day, or whatever, right? You can do it with different time units, as we'll see. So the Scheduled Executor Service adds the concept of time to being able to run tasks in the future, either once or over and over again, periodically. And then the fourth key interface that's available as part of the framework is something called the completion service. And this is the most interesting approach in my mind. And what this does is this decouples task invocation from the processing of the results of tasks when they finish, when they're completed. And a good example of this is a dry cleaning service. If you ever take your clothes to be dry cleaned, and most of you probably haven't done this a whole lot because you don't really need to do this unless you have to wear a suit or a nice shirt every day where you don't want to put it in the wash and have it be destroyed by the washer. If you're just wearing like Vanderbilt sweatshirts, you're probably not taking them to be dry cleaned. But when you do take your stuff to be dry cleaned, what you do is you go and you drop off your clothes at the dry cleaner, and they hand you a little ticket. And the ticket typically it's kind of like a claim check, what it's called. And you take that ticket, and it usually says come back in, a day or 2 days or whatever, depends what you drop off. And then you go and do your thing. You don't sit in the dry cleaner waiting for your clothes to be dry. That would be a huge waste of your time probably. So what you do is you come back at some point and you say, hey, are my clothes done yet? And if they're done, they'll give them back to you. And if they're not, then they'll say, nope, sorry, they're not done yet. Come back, tomorrow or whatever. So the idea here is that you decouple invoking some task like wash my clothes or dry clean my clothes from when you get the results back. And as you can see, this particular interface has just a handful of methods to submit tasks and then to get the results back. And we'll see that a completion service is always used in conjunction with an executor. So you use the executor to do the computation in a thread pool in the background, and then this task gives you a way to say, here's some work to do in the background, and also to say, I would like the results, please. And we'll talk about a couple different variants of how to do that later. Okay, so those are some of the key interfaces that are defined on the Java Executor framework, and we'll be talking about all of those things, and you'll get a chance to program some of them in the, actually you'll get a chance to program several of them in the upcoming programming assignments.